The Alliance engineers were beginning to understand. Humanity wasn't trying to catch up to galactic technology levels. They were changing the rules of engagement entirely. Their primitive weapons, modified and enhanced, would strike in ways the hegemony's advanced systems were never designed to counter. As the day shift ended and the night shift began, Colonel Lee reviewed the progress reports. Weapons production was exceeding expectations. Training programs were integrating human and Alliance forces effectively. Earth's military-industrial complex, awakened to a greater threat than ever before, was operating at full capacity. "We'll be ready soon," Lee told Dell as they watched another successful weapons test. "The hegemony thinks they've kept us contained, limited our development, but they don't understand what they've done. They've given us time to perfect our art of war, without them ever seeing what we're capable of." The sound of machinery and weapons testing echoed through the facility, a symphony of humanity's response to threat. Soon, these sounds would echo across the galaxy, and the hegemony would learn why they were right to fear human potential. The war machine was awake, and it was hungrier than ever. The stars hung silent in the void as Captain Sun's flotilla of converted Earth vessels lay in wait. Their ships, a mix of modified naval destroyers and purpose-built spacecraft, had been painted with light-absorbing coating that made them nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. They waited in powered-down mode, floating like dead metal among the asteroid field. "Enemy formation approaching on predicted vector," the sensor operator whispered. Though in space, no one could hear them anyway. The habit of silence during an ambush ran deep in human military training. Captain Sun watched the tactical display as the hegemony battle group moved exactly as intelligence had predicted. Their ships maintained perfect formation, shields glowing with energy as they swept the sector for Alliance vessels. They never thought to look for ships running dark, using only passive sensors. "Wait for it," Sun commanded, her voice steady despite the tension. The bridge crew held their positions, each person trained for this moment through countless simulations. "Let them get closer." The hegemony ships, 12 massive vessels bristling with energy weapons, moved into the kill zone. Their commander would be sitting comfortably in their command chair, confident in their superior technology and tactical doctrine. They had no idea they were already caught in a trap. "Now," Sun ordered, "all ships, execute pattern strike alpha." The flotilla's engines roared to life. Thrusters fired in perfectly coordinated sequences as the Earth vessels emerged from their hiding spots. The hegemony ships reacted with textbook precision, bringing their shields to full power and turning to face the threat. But they were already too late. The first salvo of kinetic rounds streaked across space. There was no energy signature to detect, no warning for the hegemony's advanced systems. Just solid tungsten cores, accelerated to relativistic speeds by electromagnetic railguns. They struck the lead hegemony vessel before its commander could even register the attack. The results were devastating. The rounds passed through the energy shields as if they weren't there, tearing into the hull beneath. Secondary explosions bloomed in silence as the ship's internal systems were shredded. "Impossible." Commander Rin's voice crackled across the command channel as his flagship shields collapsed under the barrage. "They're using primitive weapons. This cannot be." But it was happening. The Earth vessels moved in unpredictable patterns, breaking every rule of space combat the hegemony had written. Where the alien ships tried to maintain formation, the human vessels scattered and struck from multiple angles. When the hegemony attempted to target them with energy weapons, the Earth ships would disappear behind debris or friendly vessels. "Second wave, execute," Sun commanded. A fresh barrage of kinetic rounds crossed space, accompanied this time by nuclear-tipped missiles. The hegemony's point defense systems, calibrated for energy weapons, struggled to track the relatively slow-moving projectiles. The battle space turned into chaos, exactly as planned. Human vessels darted between asteroids, using them as cover. When hegemony ships adjusted their shields to try blocking physical projectiles, They left themselves vulnerable to the handful of energy weapons the Earth ships carried. "They're breaking formation," Sun's tactical officer reported with fierce satisfaction. The perfect hegemony battle line had shattered. Individual ship commanders, faced with an enemy that didn't follow any known combat doctrine, began acting independently. Ambassador Hannah smiled, knowing she had won the Admiral's support. As the Council voted to approve her plan, she began preparing for her journey to Earth. The hegemony had ruled through fear for 3,000 cycles, but they had never faced anything like humans. In his flagship, Supreme Commander Rin remained unaware of the decision that would soon shatter his empire's dominance. He continued to issue orders, confident in the hegemony's invincibility. But across the vast expanse of space, a small blue planet held the key to his downfall, and everything was about to change. The galaxy held its breath, unaware that the arrival of humanity would rewrite the rules of warfare and shatter the chains of oppression that had bound it for so long. The age of the hegemony was about to meet its greatest challenge, and nothing would ever be the same. The silver spacecraft descended through Earth's atmosphere with practiced grace, its stealth systems ensuring it remained invisible to conventional radar. Ambassador Hannah felt her heart racing as the lights of Seoul spread out below her like a glittering constellation. After decades of watching humanity from afar, first contact was about to become reality. The ship landed in a secure military facility outside the city, where Earth's highest-ranking military and political leaders waited with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. General Park stood at the front of the gathering, his decorated uniform reflecting the landing lights. Despite his calm exterior, his mind raced with questions about this unexpected visitor. When the ship's door opened and Ambassador Hannah emerged, a collective gasp rippled through the assembled humans. Her humanoid form was similar enough to be familiar, yet distinctly alien. She moved with fluid grace, her silver-toned skin catching the light as she approached the waiting delegation. "I come in peace," she spoke in perfect Korean. "Thanks to years of studying Earth's languages. And I bring news that will change everything you believe about your place in the galaxy." The next few hours were spent in a secure underground facility, where Hannah revealed the truth that had been hidden from humanity for centuries. She showed them holographic displays of the vast galactic civilization, the countless species that inhabited the stars, and the terrible war that threatened to enslave them all. "Your world has never been alone," Hannah explained, as images of massive space battles played out above the conference table. "The Chorus hegemony has dominated our galaxy for 3,000 cycles. They've enslaved dozens of species, crushed countless civilizations. Only the Stellar Alliance stands against them, and we are losing." General Park leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the holographic displays. "If what you're saying is true, why come to us now? Why reveal this after keeping us in the dark for so long?" Hannah's expression grew solemn. "Because you were never meant to be isolated. The hegemony recognized something in your species that terrified them. Your ability to adapt, to innovate, to survive against all odds. They've been actively suppressing your development, keeping you contained." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Years of mysterious satellite failures, unexplained technological setbacks, and strange atmospheric phenomena suddenly made sense. They had been caged, their progress deliberately hindered. But instead of anger, General Park smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, but one that spoke of centuries of human determination. He stood and walked to a computer terminal, entering a series of commands. The room's displays changed, showing Earth's military history. "You say they feared our potential," Park said, as images of human warfare through the ages appeared. "Let me show you why." He displayed footage of guerrilla warfare, asymmetric conflicts where smaller forces defeated larger ones through innovation and unconventional tactics. He showed them special forces operations, cyber warfare capabilities, and weapons systems that approached problems from completely unexpected angles. Hannah watched with growing amazement. Despite the hegemony's containment, humans had developed military technologies and strategies unlike anything in the galaxy. Where other species focused on energy weapons and shield technology, humans had perfected kinetic weapons that could bypass advanced shields. Where others fought according to established doctrine, humans embraced chaos and unpredictability. Your enemies expect warfare to follow certain rules, Park explained, his voice filled with quiet confidence. But humanity's greatest strength is that we've never accepted limitations. We adapt. We improvise. We overcome. When the charges detonated, they took out the station's primary and backup communications arrays, weapons systems, and sensor suites. The hegemony crew found themselves blind, deaf, and defenseless, but alive to spread the story of how easily they had been defeated. Mission accomplished, Kim reported as his team extracted through their pre-planned routes. Station is neutralized. No casualties. This was what terrified the hegemony most. Not just that humans could strike anywhere, but that they chose their targets with surgical precision. They didn't need to destroy entire stations or kill every defender. They simply had to demonstrate that nowhere was safe, no defense perfect. Admiral Jin watched as Kim's team returned to their extraction vehicles, small, stealthy craft that had been hiding in the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere. The human soldiers moved with the same efficiency in the violent winds as they had inside the station. Your species adapts to any environment, Jin noted with amazement. How is this possible? The answer was simple. Humans had spent their entire history adapting to every environment their world could throw at them. Space was just another challenge to overcome, another environment to master. As news of the raid spread, other hegemony facilities began reporting similar attacks. Human special forces teams struck everywhere, using different tactics each time. They came through asteroid fields, gas clouds, underwater bases, and even through the superheated atmospheres of Venus-like planets. The hegemony's response was predictable. They fortified their obvious weaknesses, but humans simply found new ways in, new vulnerabilities to exploit. Their tactical innovation seemed endless. They're like water, a hegemony security analyst reported. Block one route, and they find another. Prepare for one tactic, and they use something completely different. Lieutenant Kim's team was already preparing for their next mission as the reports of their success spread. They studied the layout of another hegemony facility, finding the gaps in security that its designers never imagined could be exploited. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology. It was their ability to adapt, to think differently, and to turn their enemies' strengths into weaknesses. The terror spreading through hegemony space wasn't of defeat. It was the realization that they were facing an enemy they couldn't predict or understand. And that was exactly how humanity planned to win the war. Major Song stood at the command center of the combined human alliance fleet, watching as hundreds of ships moved into position. The massive holographic display showed both friendly and enemy forces, the hegemony fleet arranged in their customary perfect formation, while the human vessels seemed scattered almost randomly. They still don't understand, Song said to his alliance counterpart. They think we're disorganized. That's exactly what we want them to think. The battle that was about to unfold would change space warfare forever. Song had spent months teaching alliance commanders about Earth's military doctrine of combined arms warfare, the coordination of different military branches and weapon systems to create overwhelming chaos for the enemy. All units, execute Operation Thunderstorm, Song commanded. The seemingly random positions of human ships suddenly made sense as different groups began their coordinated attacks. The first wave came from modified Earth railgun platforms, launching salvos of kinetic rounds from extreme range. The hegemony ships adjusted their shields, finally learning to deflect physical projectiles. But that was just the beginning. While the enemy focused on the visible threat, stealth ships slipped through their formation's gaps. These vessels, painted with light-absorbing materials and running silent, carried elite boarding teams. The hegemony's rigid formation, designed to maximize shield coverage, actually created perfect blind spots for infiltration. They fight like chaos itself. A hegemony officer's panic transmission was intercepted. There's no pattern to predict. Song smiled. Chaos was exactly the point. As the hegemony ships tried to maintain their formation while defending against multiple threats, the real attack began. Alliance energy weapons, modified with human targeting systems, struck from unexpected angles. Human ships performed maneuvers that seemed to defy physics, using gravitational slingshots and asteroid fields in ways the hegemony had never considered. "Launch the fighter screens," Song ordered. Swarms of small, agile craft emerged from carrier ships. Unlike the hegemony's fighters that moved in precise formations, these pilots had been trained in Earth's dogfighting techniques. They flew aggressively, unpredictably, forcing enemy pilots out of their comfort zones. The hegemony commander tried to adapt, ordering his ships to break formation and engage individually. But this was exactly what Song had planned for. As soon as their perfect formation broke, specialized hunter-killer groups pounced on isolated vessels. "Your ships are still fighting like they're alone," Song had explained to Alliance commanders during training. "We fight as one interconnected force. Every unit supports the others. When the enemy counters one threat, they expose themselves to another." The battle space became a symphony of controlled chaos. Human electronic warfare ships jammed hegemony communications, while Alliance vessels provided heavy fire support. Boarding teams disabled key enemy ships from within while fighter screens prevented reinforcement. Each element of the attack complemented the others. Impossible. The hegemony command channel crackled. "Every time we adapt, they change their strategy." But it wasn't random. Every move had been carefully planned, each apparent chaos masking a deliberate strategy. Song had studied Earth's greatest military commanders, from Alexander to Zhukov, learning how to coordinate different forces for maximum effect. The hegemony fleet, for the first time in centuries, found itself completely outmaneuvered. Their superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that attacked from every direction, using methods they couldn't predict or counter. "They're trying to retreat," an officer reported. "Their formation is completely broken." Song nodded. "Launch Phase 2. Don't let them regroup." A fresh wave of attacks began. Ships that had been hiding in the system's debris field revealed themselves. New tactics were employed before the enemy could analyze and adapt to the previous ones. The hegemony fleet, once proud and undefeated, began to fall apart. As Alliance commanders watched in amazement, they finally understood what Song had been teaching them. It wasn't about having better technology or more ships. It was about using every available resource in unexpected ways, about coordinating different forces to create problems the enemy couldn't solve. "This is how we'll win the war," Song explained as the battle wound down. "Not by matching their strength, but by making their strength irrelevant. Every time they adapt to our tactics, we're already moving on to something new." The aftermath of the battle would send shockwaves through the galaxy. The hegemony's invincible fleets had been crushed, not by superior firepower, but by superior strategy. Their rigid military doctrine, unchanged for centuries, had been their undoing. As Song prepared his after-action report, he knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had introduced a new way of thinking about space warfare, and the galaxy would never be the same. The hegemony would try to adapt, but they were already too late. The turning point had arrived. The age of perfectly ordered space battles was over. The chaos of human warfare had come to the stars. The hegemony capital world hung like a jewel in space, surrounded by the most formidable defensive network ever built. Thousands of warships, defense platforms, and automated weapons systems created an impenetrable barrier that had protected the seat of their empire for 3,000 cycles. General Park stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the holographic display of the enemy defenses. Behind him, Admiral Jin and a combined human alliance fleet waited for his signal. Everything they had fought for came down to this moment. "Begin the assault," Park ordered. "All units, execute final battle plan." The attack that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries to come. Instead of a direct assault on the defense network, human ships deployed massive clouds of metallic chaff and sensor-blocking particles. As hegemony targeting systems struggled to adapt, waves of modified asteroids were launched at carefully calculated trajectories. Supreme Commander Rin, watching from his fortress palace on the surface, initially dismissed these tactics as primitive. "They think to defeat us with rocks and space debris," he scoffed. But his confidence soon turned to horror as the true strategy became clear. The asteroids weren't weapons themselves. They were cover for thousands of smaller vessels and attack craft. Using the debris field as concealment, human and alliance forces infiltrated the defensive network from multiple angles. Their attacks seemed random, chaotic, but each struck at critical weak points identified through months of careful planning. "They're inside the defensive grid," a hegemony commander shouted. How did they penetrate so quickly? Space was vast and cold, but the fires of war made it burn. The massive warships of the Chorus hegemony filled the darkness between stars, their gleaming hulls reflecting the light of distant suns. For 3,000 cycles, they had ruled the galaxy with brutal efficiency, crushing any who dared to challenge their supremacy. On the bridge of his flagship, Supreme Commander Rin stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the holographic display of yet another conquered world. His tall, slender frame cast a long shadow across the polished floor as subordinates scurried around him, afraid to meet his gaze. The victory had been swift, as always. The native species had surrendered after only 3 days of orbital bombardment. "Add their resources to our database," Rin ordered, his voice cold and precise. "Begin the integration process. Any who resist will be made examples of." The crew rushed to obey, knowing the price of failure under his command. Across the galaxy, in a hidden base deep within an asteroid field, Admiral Jin of the Stellar Alliance received the news of another fallen world. His weathered face showed the weight of too many defeats as he studied the tactical displays. The Alliance fleet, once proud and strong, had been reduced to a shadow of its former glory. "Admiral," a young officer approached, holding a datapad. "The hegemony has begun moving toward the spiral arm. They've already taken 3 more systems this cycle." Jin closed his eyes, feeling the burden of command pressing down on him. The Alliance had fought bravely, but they were losing. One by one, their allies fell to the hegemony's superior numbers and technology. Their ships were outgunned, their tactics predictable to an enemy that had spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest. In a secure chamber deep within the asteroid base, the Alliance Council gathered for an emergency meeting. Representatives from a dozen species sat around a circular table, their faces illuminated by soft blue light. Ambassador Hana, known for her unconventional thinking, stood to address the council. "We cannot win this war alone," she declared, her voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "The hegemony outmatches us in every conventional measure. We need something they won't expect, something they can't predict." The council members shifted uncomfortably. They had heard many desperate plans before, but none had succeeded. Hannah activated a holographic display, showing a small blue-green planet in an unremarkable solar system. "This is Earth," she continued, "home to a species called humans. The hegemony has dismissed them as primitives, barely worth noting in their databases, but I've been studying them in secret." The display changed, showing images that made the council members lean forward in surprise. Scenes of human warfare, their rapid technological advancement, their ability to adapt and innovate in ways that defied conventional thinking. "They fight differently," Hannah explained. "They don't follow the rules of warfare as we understand them. Where we see limitations, they see opportunities. Where we follow established doctrine, they improvise. Most importantly, the hegemony has never faced anything like them." Admiral Jin studied the images with growing interest. He saw weapons that shouldn't work but did, tactics that seemed chaotic but achieved victory, and a species that had mastered the art of warfare in ways the galaxy had never considered. "The hegemony's greatest weakness," Hannah continued, "is their certainty in their own superiority. They've kept humans isolated, because they recognize their potential threat. But in doing so, they've given us an ally they aren't prepared to face. The council erupted in heated discussion. Some argued it was too risky, that humans were too unpredictable. Others feared bringing them into the wider galaxy would only create a new threat. But as the debate raged, Admiral Jin made his decision. "We're losing this war," he stated, silencing the council. "Every day, more worlds fall to the hegemony. More species are enslaved. We've tried everything else. Perhaps it's time to try something truly unexpected." Ambassador Hannah felt a surge of hope as she watched the human leaders discuss potential strategies. Their minds worked differently, approaching problems from angles her people had never considered. They didn't see the hegemony's superior technology as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a challenge to be overcome. "We'll need time to prepare," General Park said, already formulating plans. But the hegemony made a critical mistake. They tried to contain us, but in doing so, they gave us time to perfect our arts of war without their knowledge. They have no idea what they're about to face. As the meeting continued into the night, Hannah realized they had found more than just allies. They had found a species that could change the very nature of galactic warfare. The hegemony had feared human potential, and soon they would learn that their fears were justified. Outside the facility, the city of Seoul continued its nighttime bustle, its citizens unaware that their world stood on the brink of joining an interstellar war. But soon, humanity would rise from its enforced isolation, and the galaxy would never be the same. The massive underground facility buzzed with activity as soldiers and scientists from every nation worked side by side. The news of alien existence and the impending war had done what centuries of diplomacy could not: united Earth's military forces under a single banner. The United Earth Defense Force was born from necessity, and Colonel Lee stood at the heart of its technological revolution. In a specially designed testing chamber, Lee watched as another experimental round tore through the Alliance shield technology. The young engineer Dal stood beside him with his mouth open in shock. The kinetic penetrator had passed through the energy shield as if it wasn't there, embedding itself deep in the reinforced wall behind. "Impossible," Dal whispered, his silver skin reflecting the harsh laboratory lights. "Our shields are the most advanced defensive technology in the Alliance. They stop everything." Colonel Lee picked up one of the tungsten rounds, letting it catch the light. "That's exactly the problem. You designed them to stop everything you knew about. Energy weapons, plasma, particle beams. But sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective." Around them, the facility hummed with similar breakthroughs. Human scientists and engineers worked around the clock, modifying existing weapons for space warfare. They didn't try to match the hegemony's advanced technology. Instead, they found ways to bypass it completely. In another section, military tacticians studied Alliance battle footage, identifying patterns and weaknesses in hegemony formations. Their rigid, predictable tactics were a product of centuries of unchallenged supremacy. Human military doctrine, forged in countless wars and conflicts, offered something entirely different. Their ships always maintained perfect formation, a tactical officer explained to her Alliance counterparts. They follow the same attack patterns every time. It makes them vulnerable to asymmetric warfare. The Alliance representatives watched in fascination as humans demonstrated their concepts of guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics, and psychological operations. These were strategies the galaxy had never seen, developed by a species that had spent its history fighting against itself. Colonel Lee led Dal through the facility's manufacturing section, where factories that once built tanks and jets were being retooled for space warfare. "We're not trying to match your technology," Lee explained. "We're adapting what we know works, making it better, making it deadlier." They stopped at a testing range where engineers were modifying a conventional railgun. The weapon's massive barrel gleamed under the lights as technicians made adjustments. "Watch this," Lee said, nodding to the operators. The railgun fired, its electromagnetic fields accelerating a tungsten rod to unprecedented velocities. On the testing screen, they watched as the projectile passed through multiple layers of Alliance shield technology without slowing. The impact on the target was catastrophic. No energy signature to detect. Lee explained to the stunned Dell. No shield can stop it. And in space, there's no air resistance to slow it down. Pure kinetic energy, delivered with perfect accuracy. Throughout the facility, similar innovations were taking shape. Stealth technology developed for aircraft was being adapted for spacecraft. Submarine warfare tactics were being modified for three-dimensional space combat. Everything humanity had learned about warfare was being transformed into weapons the hegemony had never faced. "Your people think we're primitive," Lee said, watching as another test firing shattered a shield array. "They judge us by their standards, their understanding of warfare. That's going to be their downfall." That was exactly what Sun had been waiting for. Launchboarding torpedoes. Let's show them how humans fight up close. Armored pods shot from the Earth vessels, each carrying a team of space-adapted Marines. The hegemony ships, their attention split between multiple threats, failed to stop them all. Soon, the alien crews would learn about humanity's expertise in close-quarters combat. Commander Rin watched in horror as his carefully coordinated battle group fell into disarray. These primitives weren't fighting according to any known tactical doctrine. Their weapons shouldn't have been effective against superior hegemony technology. Their ships shouldn't have been able to maneuver so unpredictably. "All ships, retreat," he finally ordered, but it was too late. His flagship shuddered as more kinetic rounds tore through its hull. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as sections were exposed to vacuum. Captain Sun allowed herself a small smile as she watched the hegemony forces attempt to withdraw. Pursuit pattern Delta. Don't let them escape to warn their fleet. The battle ended in less than an hour. The mighty hegemony battle group was reduced to floating wreckage. The few ships that survived were captured, their crews learning firsthand about human boarding tactics. As Sun recorded her after-action report, she knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony would learn and adapt, but humanity would always be one step ahead, thinking of new ways to turn their own technological limitations into advantages. The first strike had been successful. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had been feared, and why containing them had only made them more dangerous. Inside a darkened hegemony station orbiting a gas giant, alarms suddenly blared to life. Security forces rushed through the corridors, their energy weapons charged and ready. But they were already too late. Lieutenant Kim's team had been inside for hours, moving through maintenance shafts and service tunnels their enemies had never thought to guard. "They always look for the obvious approach," Kim whispered to his team through their secure comm channel. The Special Forces operators moved like ghosts through the station's infrastructure, their adaptive camouflage blending perfectly with the surroundings. They never expect anyone to come through the waste processing systems. The mission was simple: disable the station's long-range communications and defense systems. The execution, however, showcased why humanity had become the hegemony's worst nightmare. Kim's team had studied how the station's crew thought, how they moved, and most importantly, how they failed to secure what they considered impossible entry points. In the station's command center, the hegemony officers were still trying to understand what was happening. Their sensors showed no unauthorized ships in the area. Their internal security systems detected no breaches. Yet somehow, critical systems were failing one by one. "Check the main reactor," a commander ordered, his voice tinged with panic. "How are they doing this?" But Kim's team wasn't at the reactor. They had split into smaller groups, using tactics perfected through centuries of Earth's special operations. While the station's security forces rushed to protect obvious targets, the human operators struck at seemingly random but carefully chosen points. Admiral Jin, watching the operation from a cloaked Alliance vessel, couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans moved through toxic gas-filled sections without hesitation, their specially designed suits allowing them to go where the hegemony never expected enemies to survive. They crossed open space between hull sections, operated in zero gravity with practiced ease, and somehow seemed to predict every security response. "Your people are remarkable," Jin said to the human liaison officer. "We've never seen anyone fight like this." Reports were already spreading through hegemony space about these new tactics, stories of entire facilities falling to invisible attackers. Tales of human soldiers appearing from impossible places, striking critical targets and vanishing before responses could be mounted. The psychological impact was devastating to hegemony morale. Inside the station, Kim's team reached their final objectives. They had systematically isolated different sections, trapping security forces behind sealed bulkheads. The station's crew had never trained for enemies who understood their systems so completely. "All teams, execute final phase," Kim ordered. Small charges, designed to destroy critical systems without compromising the station's hull, were precisely placed. The humans had learned early that causing unnecessary casualties only strengthened enemy resolve. Strategic targets were what mattered.